on ABC Radio across New South Wales, or the local radio, Metropolitan and ABC Radio Canberra. Nice to be having Brecky with you. Also nice always to catch up with our next guest, Neil Hermes, as I said, nationally and internationally recognised author and ornithologist. And we're going to have a little bit of a chat about inland gulls. Neil, good morning and Happy New Year belatedly.
Greg, thank you, and thank you for the wonderful introduction. And I'm glad we're able to talk about seagulls for the whole of New South Wales because it's a fascinating story.
Well, we started on the interest in why are they populating so many inland cities. But tell us a little bit about the gull species. Are they all the same? Are the ones here the same as those down the coast, Neil, or is there differences?
Look, there's many different species of gulls in the world, but if we have a little look just to New South Wales and Canberra, we have a couple of species. There's along the coast. There's a couple of species that are about double the size of the seagull that we would commonly call the seagull around town. But look, when people talk about gulls in New South Wales, in Sydney, in Wollongong, in Tweed, in Canberra or in Broken Hill, they're talking about a bird that's they call the seagull, but if you want to look it up in a book, it'll be called the silver gull, and it's an abundant bird now in Australia.
Why is it so abundant, Neil? Is it just a great adapter to wherever it gets to, or is there more to it?
It just loves people, Greg. This bird, it loves people. When prior to European settlement of Australia, a silver gull would have been an extremely rare bird to see. They scavenged along the coasts. They bred in very small numbers here and there on offshore islands, but they struggled to make a living. They really did. And then with the huge increase in numbers of humans, particularly since the 1950s, and particularly things like our rubbish tips, the numbers of silver gulls since the 1950s have absolutely exploded all along the coast in New South Wales and then to every inland city in New South Wales as well.
How far inland do they go? If I went to Moree, would I find them there, or is that too big a call, Neil?
If you were in Broken Hill, you'd have them,
right.
Greg. Every city with a modest population of humans, where we dispose of rubbish. And when I say dispose of rubbish, it means, a local rubbish tip, or it can be, the things we discard around our shopping centres. Silver gulls love shopping centres. They love anywhere they can get a free handout. One of the things that they used to do a lot of was to follow fishing boats, and that was one of the ways in which they really got a heads up, and they started increasing in numbers a few decades back. But, we didn't have records of silver gulls in Canberra until the 1960s. And it was only when Lake Burley Griffin filled and we had a population of people around our towns, and in particular, some big open landfill areas, the numbers of silver gulls absolutely exploded.
Where do they fit in our ecosystem, Neil, given that they seem to prey on the things that we think are not good enough for us, that we finish with or want no more of? Are they a pest, or do they have a benefit? Where do you see them in the ecosystem?
Well, as I said before, they traditionally, prior to the large concentrations of humans, they were scavengers even then. But the thing that they were scavenging, there wasn't much of.
Yes.
There wasn't much scavenge in the way of sort of just food on the ground in a place like Canberra or Broken Hill or Dubbo, or even Wollongong. They might have got the odd dead fish on the beach, or perhaps a dead seal might have created a little bit of extra food for a group. But really, they were opportunistic scavenging on the edge of, whatever. They weren't specialist feeders, so they just had to find what they could. And when we came along and started, buying our fish and chips at the local shops and tossing out the odd chip here and there, they certainly, it doesn't take you long, Greg, if you're in a spot where silver gulls are about, you throw out the odd chip or two and you've suddenly got 100 birds all around you. They're watching all these spots and they're ready for that tucker. So, and what happens, Greg, is the numbers increased enormously. We have an island off Wollongong now that has 50,000 breeding pairs of silver gulls, where a couple of decades back, there would have been less than 1,000. So they really have exploded as a direct consequence of the food that we can provide. And they do like to have a bit of water about, but they don't need it to feed on. So, Lake Burley Griffin, the Kinchega Lakes at Broken Hill, anywhere inland where you've got a little bit of water and some handouts, you'll have silver gulls.
You mentioned the commotion. Well, they certainly seem to be able to find food from anywhere, and we're all guilty of throwing a chip or whatever else to the gulls and watching them perform for the kids. They seem to be fairly boisterous. Are they an aggressive bird, Neil?
They're pretty, well, they have to. When you live in a group where you've got thousands of other mates all wanting that chip, you've got to be pretty agile and pretty keen to be the one that wins the chip. So, yes, they're very competitive. But they're an amazing bird. I mean, when these chicks hatch out on these islands and they've got to try and find some, or when I say islands, when they nest now in places like islands on Lake Burley Griffin, islands along the rivers of New South Wales, or even, and you were talking about Old Parliament House a little earlier in the show, Greg, last year there was a colony of silver gulls nested at New Parliament House on the little almost island that sits in front of the main entrance. There was a little good group of gulls nested and produced chicks on the fountain on the waterway right in front of Old Parliament House. So when that chick hatches out, it's got to find somewhere it can feed, and there's records of these birds flying 3,000 kilometres to try and find another place to be. Once they're in an area that's well populated by gulls, they've got to move on and find another home. So they're finding places from Alice Springs to Cape York to Unadilla. I mean, they are finding the places where there's a little bit of water and a handout, and they'll be there.
Neil Hermes is our guest on Saturday Breakfast. Neil is Canberra-based ornithologist and author, recognised and acclaimed nationally and internationally in a number of fields, but particularly ornithology. It is his area of interest. We're talking about, well, we start with seagulls. We've in fact realised that they are silver gulls. They're large numbers and seem to be overtaking towns everywhere. Neil has explained why that might be the case. Neil, many towns, council or at council level and at individual trader level, now have signs out saying, "Please don't feed the gulls." What should we do with these birds if we're going to coexist?
Okay, so look, the silver gulls have got no problem, surviving and living around our cities, but they are very irritating and can be, quite a nuisance for individual traders in places and for councils. The practice basically is to try and make sure that open tips don't have food scraps out, and that tends to happen less these days. We're managing our waste much better, so the gulls aren't able to use what were big open tips, which might have been common 20 years ago. So that's one very important way of removing large amounts of potential food. Not feeding birds around places where people are eating, particularly outdoors, is also a very good practice. And good management of things like, fisheries disposal of waste and other waste that might go into the sea is also, many years ago, we used to pump a lot of rubbish into the sea. So all of those practices will moderate the numbers of gulls, but won't reduce them, and certainly will help in terms of not having them being the pest birds around feeding areas that they can be. But individually, what we can do is perhaps not give them that chip, even though, it might entertain the kids, because all it does is encourage them to come to the next person and the next person. And, people do get frightened by the birds. They get intimidated by them. And the birds really don't need the extra bit of food.
I won't. And just finally, Neil, with their adaptability and their and that we'd give them lots of circumstances that are good for them to make a home and possibly to thrive in. Do you and other ornithologists look at a situation where we're going to have to try and control the population of silver gulls at some point in the future?
Look, I don't think there's any particular threat that would be necessary. I think we just need to be sensible about how we handle our food refuse. And we're doing that for other reasons anyway, for all sorts of other good reasons. So that will all contribute to, having good, healthy populations of silver gulls, but not birds that are going to be causing problems either for humans or for other species of birds or other wildlife. I think, we can get a pretty good balance as long as we're sensible with what we do with our food waste.
Excellent, Neil. I know that you rarely spend a lot of time standing still. What do you got in line for 2022? Are you working on anything in terms of a new book, etc.?
I am. I'm glad you asked me that. I do have a book which is called Canberra Birds, The Birds of Canberra and the High Country, which covers all the birds of from Dubbo south to all the alpine areas, all the way down to Victoria, but particularly covers Canberra. And I'm doing a companion book to that, which is all the other wildlife that we get in that area. But I have a lot of stuff on my new website too, Greg, which is neilhermes.com.au. And anyone wants to know a bit about birds, either in Australia or internationally, I'd encourage them to have a look at my YouTube channel and my website.
All right, neilhermes.com.au. Okay.
Beautiful.
Always a pleasure,
Thanks.
Neil. Happy New Year to you again, and onwards and upwards.
No worries. Good on you, Greg, and good luck with the rest of the show.
Thank you, my friend. And yes, just be... if we don't throw the chip, you might see the sign and think, is that fair dinkum? Well, really it is pretty important. We've been throwing some songs in along the way, and I'm delighted to share with everyone because the program this morning, and I say welcome if you've just joined us, is coming out of Canberra, but we're heading into Sydney and right across New South Wales, which is pretty exciting, and I imagine maybe even leaking into those surrounding states because I don't think radio frequencies know where borders are and immediately stop there. So wherever you are, it's lovely to have your company. You can contact us right through the morning. The phone number is 1300 681 666. The SMS is 0467 922 666. How do gulls, pelicans and other water birds know when the lake air is filling? I should have asked Neil that, Jim. I'm sorry, but anyhow, we shall... Well, maybe if you go to neilhermes.com.au, you can get an answer.